you doing? Bob Brown here. So I saw a video online which I thought was really good, and it was basically demonstrating their thoughts on a tall arm versus a short arm, and how, in their opinion, I think what they were saying is the shorter arm seemed to have an advantage, and the taller arm was at a disadvantage because they had to drop their knuckles. So let's assume for a second that all strengths are relatively close. Both have equal back pressure, both have equal hand and wrist strength. What actually creates leverage? I've made some notes, so I'll be looking down. So if everything is equal in strength, there's only one way to gain leverage in arm wrestling, and that's with height. Okay? Now height can be gained through up, okay, or it can be gained through back pressure, which lowers your opponent's arm, making your arm taller. And while I completely agree that at the start of the match, both guys top rollers, one guy, the shorter arm, is starting with his knuckles more straight up and down. The other guy is forced to back his arm up, and his knuckles are now facing this way. The guy with the shorter arm has a height advantage. But there's one other better way, in my opinion. It's a move that I refer to as fishing, because you look like you're holding a fishing pole, and you can still keep your elbow at the front of the pad if the guy with the taller arm drops his knuckles. And of course everyone's like, oh my lord, why would anyone want to drop their knuckles? Well, here's why. The guy with the shorter arm, he's like this. The guy with the taller arm is like this. Okay? Now the guy with the shorter arm, like this, has now reached his maximum ability to gain height. If he comes up any more, his elbow comes off the pad, and he can't gain any more height. If he lowers his body, you can see he gains a little bit more height, but he's still at that maximal position without the elbow coming up. Now, the person whose knuckles is like this, he is not at his maximal height. He is prior to the go, but once the go sounds, or once the ref calls go, first of all, if the gentleman is strong enough to go like this, well then he has all the height advantage right back. He might not be, but is this arm, which is still going to be at a downward angle, versus the short arm, who's probably straight up and down, the guy with his knuckles, when he lowers his body and rises with his hand, he can gain a tremendous more leverage advantage. Okay? So the leverage advantage at the go belongs to the shorter arm, but the leverage advantage after the go belongs to the guy with the taller arm. Because remember, we're not only trying to get leverage on this joint, okay? We're trying to get leverage on this joint. The gentleman with the smaller or the shorter arm, who's like this, doesn't have the ability to get the leverage on this joint as much as on this joint, he has the ability to drag, open up the taller arm's arm. So yep, the shorter arm has leverage on this joint, but it doesn't have leverage on the wrist joint. And as I think most of us understand, the second you have leverage on the wrist, you gain so much more strength. Everyone is stronger with the wrist like this, not like this. So when the tall arm drops his body, gains height, the guy with the short arm, wrist, starts to fold back. As a matter of fact, think about the match. The guy with the short arm starts hitting me over. Well, as he hits me over, my wrist isn't necessarily going like this. My wrist is coming like this, and I can still gain maximal height, and gain more leverage. And The battle of who wins the wrist, it's not, is my wrist stronger than your wrist? That's not the battle. The battle is my ability to create back pressure, or as we're learning, up pressure, versus my opponent's wrist against my opponent's back pressure or up pressure against my wrist. It's not wrist versus wrist. It's back pressure versus wrist and back pressure versus wrist. Okay? Well, this gentleman with the short arm can only create back pressure against the wrist. He can't create up pressure because he's got a shorter arm. The person with the taller arm and the dumped wrist, he can create back pressure against the bottom part of his opponent's hand and create up pressure. And I guarantee you, from a leverage standpoint, someone's ability to pull this way versus someone's ability to fulcrum off their elbow and go like this will always be stronger than this. So the gentleman with the taller arm, even if both competitors have equal strength this way, the person with the taller arm who can pivot off that elbow joint, that person will be able to create more back pressure. Plus, generally speaking, the guy with the taller arm probably comes with longer fingers. So the guy with the short arm is only getting around so far on the tall arm's hand, and he's forced to keep his knuckles high, where the guy whose wrist is down, he's getting further around. And as both of these hands separate, because the reality is, again, if these guys are kind of close in strength, the guy like this is coming across, the guy like this is coming up. There's going to be a separation in the palms, okay? Chances are they might slip, or it's highly likely that they'll slip, but the person with the longer fingers is going to be able to hold on longer than the guy with the shorter fingers, the short arm. So it may not slip. The guy with the taller arm may clamp onto some fingers and win, okay? But now let's assume that the slip happens, okay? It's still the same pressures. My ability, and again, if we have equal ability to lat drag, a typical top roll, okay? I guarantee if we can both do 100 pounds with this, we can both do more like this, pivoting off of our elbow. The problem is the guy with the shorter arm, when he goes to create more back pressure, he still only gets to a certain height. Where the guy with the taller arm, whose wrist is dumped at the go, he's going to be able to create more height and way more pressure against the shorter arm's hand and wrist. Let's see, it's not wrist, fingers, yes, and a little pad on top of the body. So I think I've covered everything. This is a move that back in the late 80s I started referring to as fishing. You know, people call it different things. I called it fishing because it looks like your arm is in the position that you're fishing, and you're reeling in that fish, is why I've always called it that. So when I'm fishing against someone with a shorter arm, especially if that shorter arm is a hooker, well, they're going to fall. Their hand will roll much easier. You definitely have leverage on the bottom part of that hand. But if they're a top roller, at the go, the person with the shorter arm has a leverage advantage. But as soon as the go happens, the person with the taller arm has the ability to gain more height. So it's not just the leverage at the go, but it's then the ability to gain more leverage after the go. So again, when this person says go, he drops his body as if to pick this opponent's elbow off the table, the shorter elbow's off the table, and then the battle becomes back pressure versus wrist. Now, the person with the shorter arm, yes, if he has the back pressure and the wrist flexion strength to get the taller arm to go like this, well then, yes, he's going to keep his leverage. The shorter arm will keep his leverage. But as we discussed, I'm assuming that everyone is somewhat close in strength. Because if both people have the same wrist curl ability, same weight, the same back pressure ability, the same pronation ability, the same supination ability, let's say they have basically the equal strength. This person's back pressure is only going to create so much strength, the short arm. But this guy's back pressure is going to create more strength. And this person will be able to crack the wrist of the shorter arm. There's my 2 cents. If you have questions, please let me know. This would have been a lot easier with another human hand, but I didn't have one here. So have a great day.